This is hawthorn. So hawthorn is a really good tree for the heart. I use the leaves as food. They are, some people call it like the bread tree because it gives you sort of a long energy feel, like you ate a piece of bread kind of. And so the young leaves, you could put them in salads. Usually I just blend them though. So I'll blend them with fruit or blend them into like a green salad, you know, a blended salad type of thing with cucumbers and tomatoes and celery, you know, whatever.
Does it produce any kind of fruit at all, or is it just the leaves?
So hawthorn, a haw is a little fruit, and I think it's sort of in the apple family. I mean, so like the roses, it has a fruit something like that, but it's kind of, it's sweet, but it's kind of like an overripe apple, sort of, but little tiny, and it sort of melts in your mouth. And so
that's cool.
The good thing about the hawthorn is the leaves, they actually have a sweet aftertaste.
Really?
So they're pleasant, you know, they're not bitter like peach leaves. They're really bitter, and apple leaves really aren't the tastiest ever. But I'll eat these are plums, I'll eat those, and sometimes in the winter I'll put the Oregon grape into smoothies. This is a pear, it's got 3 grafts on it.
You said Oregon grape, what's that?
So, Oregon grape is this. It keeps its leaves all winter, and people pull it up and they use the roots. They're really bright yellow, and they'll use those for antibiotic, natural types of things. And they produce little tiny fruits that are sour, and I've taken and blended them really carefully, not blending the seeds, and then strained them, and then I get like a purple lemonade, and I can sweeten that up a little bit. This is a plum, like little tiny plums. They're really sweet sour kind of, but they're good and juicy. And this is that's like a blackish to dark plum, and this is a yellow plum, and they're not really ripe until either they fall off or they turn a really bright yellow kind of a thing. So, but they're good, you know, they're good too, and I can use the leaves off of both of them. They're pleasant. They, you know, instead of like some people will make kale smoothies and things like that, I'll use tree leaves, you know, because a tree is a perennial, so it lives a long time, so it kind of makes sense that we should eat foods that come from things that live a long time. And it's, you know, we don't have to plant it every year, it's just there for us. And, you know, anybody can go to the supermarket and buy kale, or we grow it in our garden, you know, and it's good. But if I'm gonna make something in a smoothie, why not use tree leaves? This year we had mulberries, you know, about that long, and they were sweeter than honey. I mean, really sweeter than honey. Like, I would eat until I'm full mulberries, and it would almost give me a sore throat. They were so sweet.
Really?
So, but mulberry leaves, you know, for silkworms, that's what they eat. That's the only thing that silkworms eat. And so mulberry trees are like nettles. I don't know if you've heard of nettles. They're really rich in minerals. They say like 20% minerals. Well, they say the same thing for mulberry leaves. And the nice thing about mulberry leaves when you're using them in smoothies is they make it thick and creamy. So you could blend it with an apple and you would get it creamy instead of all the apple floating to the top kind of a deal. This is a elderberry. The lady gave it to me and I just decided to plant it. It was just a little tiny whip when I planted it. And that thing grows like crazy. I have to prune it a couple of times a year, or it just, I mean, it sends shoots way up in the air.
Really?
And then, so what I use it for, I do use the leaves just a tiny bit in smoothies. They're not the tastiest ever, but you know, they have their benefits as well. But I'll take the elderberries and put them in the dehydrator and dry them out. People make elixirs with elderberries to help the immune system. But I do like sorrels. So There's sorrels. There's like a sheep sorrel. I think, yeah, you can sort of see that they end up having sort of pointed leaves on the end. Not so much with these, but they're a sour, so they're a good substitute for lemon. If you don't have lemon, you grow sorrel. Like we have green sorrel. There's a plant out there. It's kind of under the wood chips out there, but it's great for salads because it gives you this alternate flavor. You know, you bite into it and it's like, whoa, and your salivary glands go for it. So that's kind of a fun thing. These are the ground cherries. And if you're interested in growing some,
good.
Take some home in your pocket. They've got viable seeds.
Oh, really? These?
Yep. Squash. You know, like zucchini squash, kind of like that, and I just grated it up with some apple. I don't use it for eating. I mean, it's fairly pleasant to eat it.
Right.
And I used.
What do you use it for then?
No, I use it as a bread.
Oh, okay.
So I'll make a sandwich. Like I'll take my sunflower greens and some lentils and cucumbers or whatever I have, and I'll put it on that to hold it. You know, sprouts. Right. Whatever, and it's not, I'm just using it as a holder, you know, so it's not like, oh, this tastes so good. It's just like free stuff that I already have,
right?
And I'll glue it together with like plums or blended up orange. When that dries, it kind of glues everything together and holds it together and keeps it from falling apart. If I just put the squash with some onions or something like that, it would probably all break apart. So, you know, you can get creative with, you know, try things. And a lot of times when I dry leaves, I just take a paper bag and I stuff my leaves in it and I open it up into the dehydrator. It sort of blows the bag up, and you know, that's how I dry leaves. Like, oh, here's something. Watermelon. Have you had dried watermelon?
I have not.
Go ahead, just grab a couple pieces, or... It was kind of interesting. And this is that watermelon that we grew.
Oh, yeah.
I had some peppers, so mine is a little spicy right now. I don't know if you're feeling any spicy. Okay. But sometimes they get mixed up a little bit. You know, a little pepper gets on the dehydrator tray. They're kind of, you know, it's almost like a peanut butter taffy or you know, like a peanut brittle or something like that. Only it was just, you know, a watermelon. Kind of a fun treat, like, you know, eating a dried date or...
Yep.
And you can leave the seeds in. I don't really worry about digging them out. They're kind of little crunchy things that go on in there. And mulberries, we dried mulberries. If I don't dry mulberries dry, you can stick your hand in there if you want. They almost have a little bit of bitter to them, but they're still kind of good. A lot of times I'll grind them up to a powder and sprinkle them on something, or I'll put them in a smoothie. You know, they say things with color are where the antioxidants are. So mulberries, I mean, my face was all stained black from eating them this summer. That's where the color is. You know, people say, oh, blueberries are pretty high in antioxidants. Well, nothing is as dark as these guys.
Right.
And once you have a mulberry tree, and you know, I've got some extra mulberry trees because I save them when they come up here and there. I'll set you up with one of those if you want.
Yeah.
And once you have one, it starts dropping stuff. You know, there's probably 1,000 mulberry seeds in one mulberry. You're not going to get, you know, maybe one of those seeds will sprout. Probably not. You know, I get maybe maybe 10 trees a year that just sort of come up on their own. And you know, you can keep them this high. You don't have to grow them up into a tree. The leaves are good. You know, you can mix them, and you could do stir fry with them, whatever. Chop them fine. The part of the leaves of the trees that I like to eat are the tips. Where it's growing, that's where, you know, there's actually growth hormones and things like that in the tips of trees where they're growing. So that's kind of where the tree is at. That's where it's the tenderest. It just kind of makes sense. Well, if we're going to eat it from there. I mean, yeah, when I save leaves and I dry them, I just take the whole stem, you know, all of them off, or whatever is convenient. And my sunflowers, they come like this, you know, they've got little parts and junk in them, and I pick it out. I dump it out on a tray like this, and I sort it, and then then I move it over to here with the ones that are more sorted. And when I soak them, you can see that these guys are growing, and I should have planted them already.
Right.
They're actually finding gravity already, so it's going to cause them a little trouble when I do plant them, but it's not the biggest deal ever. I soak them with the ocean salt and hydrogen peroxide. I use food grade hydrogen peroxide. Oh, probably a quarter teaspoon or something like that. When I soak them for about 24 hours. And you can shake them around a little bit. I normally put a lid on like this, and sometimes I'll flip it upside down so it makes sure that everything gets soaked. So, like, here's nettles. I have found some varieties of nettles. I bring nettles home from wherever because they're just, I kind of like them. I don't know if you've ever eaten fresh nettles, but you can take the fresh nettle and put it in your teeth and it doesn't sting you if you do it right, and it's kind of creamy. Has fairly good flavor, high in minerals. And I found some over in Tushy that when they were growing in Tushy, I think they were growing probably about 5 foot tall, something like that. And I moved them over here, grew them around that apricot tree that I took out in the wood chips and leaf mulch, and they grew about 9 feet tall.
Wow. And
leaves on them probably about like this. So some of the biggest ones, a lot of nettles that I brought in home were bitter. I mean, they're not so pleasant.
Right.
It seems like, though, once the nettles are dried, they are less bitter. But if I'm eating them fresh, they're more bitter. But these don't really seem to get bitter until they like start going to seed or something like that. So nettles, this is mulberry. I actually ran it through a strainer. So I have some strainers like this, and I'll crunch it up with my hands and I'll run it through the strainer with a cloth. It's not really necessary, but sometimes I'll do that. Like if I'm doing basil or something like that and I want to dry basil, if you do it to this texture, it's really easy to just grab a pinch of it and put it in something you're doing versus having a whole leaf with a little piece of stem. So goji berries, kind of broke them up.
And those are all the leaves, right?
Those are the leaves. This is stevia. And what I do with the stevia is I cut the stems, put them in the paper bags, and then once they're dry, I just sort of crumple it up and get rid of the stems and kind of smash it up. I have a spoon that I use when I crush it in a jar. It's just like a broken wooden spoon. Right. And I take and I just sort of pound it, and it breaks everything up. And so I can get more in the jar, takes up less space. These are hawthorn leaves. And I'm going to taste one here to see if you can actually chew it. it doesn't taste quite as good as it is when it's fresh. But you can get the idea, you know, that it's not a bitter thing, it's not something that's terrible. And it almost has a creaminess to it once. I may not have given you quite enough for it to break down into creamy. But, and cherry leaves. So cherry is another thing. And one of the interesting things about my cherry tree, it's actually a seedling, it's not, you know, it's the one that I've had here for a while. I didn't show it to you out there, but it's by the maple tree. When we got here, it was starting to make cherries, and it had worms. It would get worms in the cherries. Like every cherry had a hole in it and a little worm in it. And I started spraying, I learned about the ocean water, and I started foliar feeding with ocean water. So I would spray the leaves. I would do about 2,000 parts per million, and I would do it at least once a month, more often if I got to it. And no more worms in my cherries. Something about it made the tree healthier. It was that micro minerals that it needed. And the only time I ever got any worms in my cherries was on the back side of the tree. It's kind of up against the fence, and I was like either too lazy to go over there and spray it. I found one cherry that had a worm in it there, but nowhere else. So I foliar feed my peach trees and, you know, all that stuff. And I don't have, you know, I don't really have any worms in anything. Apples, so I've got an apple tree over there by the cherry tree. It's just west of the raspberries that we were looking at. And maybe a little bug bite on the outside of the apple, 1 or 2 of them, but no worms. So, you know, I think like pesticides are just poison the humans and the trees. You know, Paul, obviously he's been with his soil long enough and he doesn't get any bugs. You know, but if someone's starting out with covering their earth with the mulch, you know, using the ocean water in a dilute concentration as a foliar feed, it's taking care of those problems. It hasn't taken care of aphid problems on the brassicas for me, but it hasn't hurt anything either.
So for you, because you're huge into like smoothies and stuff, what is your like daily diet? I mean, do you just have a smoothie for breakfast and then cheeseburger for lunch kind of a thing, or are you on almost a full liquid diet?
No, I'm not on a full liquid diet. I like to eat. So it depends on what my schedule is. Like if I've got a lot of things that I need to do, it's easy for me to make 3 quarts of smoothie, and anytime I'm hungry, I have something that is going to sustain me. I always like to take apples, you know, I actually go pick wild apples in the hills, and I'll show you. I picked maybe 500 pounds of apples this year, and I'll go through those through the winter. And they're free. Yeah, it takes time. I know you like to travel, and so you can find places like that all in the hills around here. There's different places. You know, if you're interested, I can sort of point you out in some directions. They're just like growing beside the road, and you stop. You know, all of them taste different. Some of them aren't the greatest ever. Some of them are wormy, but you know, you can find different places, and maybe you can find places that I haven't found. So I'll usually eat an apple or something like that with my smoothie. So I munch, you know, you saw me, I was munching on my apple and having my smoothie. And that's easy. But sometimes for breakfast, maybe I'll make my smoothies, and I have a little more time for breakfast. So I'll maybe drink a half a quart of smoothie, and then I'll make a sandwich of some sort, and maybe have it with a salad or something like that for breakfast. I know if I have my big heavy meal at the beginning of the day, I actually am not so, I can skip a salad for supper. I can just, you know, have a smoothie or eat some fruit or something like that for supper, and I actually wake up feeling better the next day, versus I'm gonna have a sandwich and an avocado and a, you know, whatever for supper because I starved myself all day. Now I'm gonna have a meal, and then, you know, we all just sort of go into our lethargic haze. And it's like, oh, now I can sleep. But I feel better the next day if I eat lighter for supper. So, I mean, sometimes, like in cherry season, when I've got more cherries than I know what to do with, I'll just eat cherries 3 times a day. And, you know, at first, when we're eating cherries, it gives us, you know, we just go and go and go, but our bodies, if that's all we give it, it gets used to it and everything normalizes. You know, it's like the cherry cleanse for the first day or so, but then we sort of normalize. So, and cherries are, you know, people use them for pain, which I never really noticed that per se, but I'm able to work good and hard just eating cherries, you know. So, whatever's in season I like to do. You know, what cabbages, I like cabbage. It keeps, even if you're buying cabbage at the store, it's inexpensive, you know, and if it's not like you buy a box of lettuce, if you don't eat that box of lettuce in 3 days, it goes bad. But I can buy 2 or 3 cabbages and it can sit in the fridge for 2 months and I don't have to throw it out. You know, I make sauerkraut, so sauerkraut helps. It's kind of like the beneficial bacteria that grows in the sauerkraut, and it helps to heal our digestive tract, because we've all had antibiotics, which kills all the good guys, and we get too many bad guys, and it makes us sick. So it's something that people have been using for centuries to stay healthy. You know, it helps people with get over colds.
Oh, cool.